the whole situation in Haiti has been getting more and more desperate. And the other thing is those remittances, when they come, generally are not used, according to the data, to go into the local economy. They're used to get out of Haiti. They're used to find some way of getting a passport, getting onto a plane to get out of Haiti and try and find life somewhere else. So, yeah, you could almost put Haiti in the same basket as Somalia, Afghanistan, these countries that, for all intents and purposes are almost failed states and dependent on aid just to keep going.
Remittances, money sent by the diaspora from places like the Brooklyn neighborhood of Flatbush, home to a sizable Haitian community.
It's a real blow for us because the president was killed while he was still in power. But I don't feel bad because these people weren't running the country well. Moise was a thug. They killed the thug.
It's a bad thing for real. Even I don't like him. Even he don't like him. Even you don't like him. He's not supposed to die like that.
We want Haitians in the country and Haitian out of the country to come together. We can't trust the foreigners. We can't trust neither the State Department or those people. Many of those rogue diplomats, French, Canadian, and all those white former colonials sitting down in decision in Haiti.
And Kedevan Gorjestani, there is a lot of resentment towards the international community, including against the United States, for not having spoken up more when Jovenel Moise tried to change the Constitution, and that they were essentially, the U.S. accused of giving him a free pass. And it's interesting because we've heard mixed things from Haitians in the last 24 hours. They want help from the United States. They want an independent international inquiry, but they also want to restore some of the hurt pride we heard in those remarks.
Yes, and it shows really this really different approach from the Haitians vis-a-vis the Americans. You can see it in how the U.S. is responding to the situation right now. I was at the White House press briefing yesterday, and Jen Psaki was asked multiple times and in very different sort of questions about the situation in Haiti, and the response was pretty much the same over and over and over again. She said, we support the democratic institutions of Haiti. We stand by the fact of holding elections by the end of the year, and we are there to assist Haiti if they ask for it. They have actually asked for it now, and just moments ago in today's briefing, Jen Psaki, the press secretary, announced that there was a U.S. delegation going to Haiti to help with security issues with the investigation, including FBI officials who are going now to Haiti to help out with figuring out what's going on. But overall, it seems that the U.S. doesn't really know where to position itself regarding the political situation in Haiti. And we've heard some Haitians, especially Haitians here in the United States, saying that, well, the Biden administration is not really taking a position. They're just pretty much following what previous administrations have done, including Donald Trump, and basically letting things flow and not really taking a position or intervening, and not really, trying to do something to help Haiti.
Victor Mallet, that's interesting what Kedevan is bringing up, because we've heard Haitians say, well, the Americans ready, and the French, ready to give whoever's in power in Haiti a free pass as long as they don't side with Cuba and Venezuela.
Yeah, I mean, it's one more example of a country where the West is not really able to exercise, the influence or the power that it wants to do. It's just very worrying, because it's one more example of an unstable country, one more assassinated president, one more excuse for war. It's slightly ominous that you had this sort of report that some of the people may have come over from the Dominican Republic. So it's it's just a sort of, it seems to, one doesn't want to be too pessimistic about the world, but really a lot of the places where the US and its allies try to sort of exercise influence, they're not really able to do so in any effective way.
Yeah, we go around the table, Nico Hines, but of course we're no closer to figuring out who done it? Who are these people who've been arrested? These Colombians and Haitians who are naturalized Americans.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of dichotomy there, because if they were such brilliant commando unit, as some people are saying, why did they not manage to get themselves across the border into the Dominican Republic where they could escape? So it seems to me that if they didn't get out of the country quickly, they must have believed that either that they were going to start some sort of a coup, and perhaps the people had told them that they would then be safe, and they would be part of the, protected by the new administration that was going to come in. But that doesn't even seem clear, because normally in these situations you ask yourself, well, who stands to gain from this? And in this case, we've got two prime ministers, both of whom claiming that they should now be the one to take control. Claude Joseph kind of leapt immediately to kind of prime suspect number one in my mind when he first of all announced the death early on, in the early hours while the rest of Haiti was still asleep. He was already doing interviews on the radio. He was doing interviews with international media within 12 hours and claiming that he was now running the entire country and had assumed the presidency, and that always makes people think, this is a guy who maybe had a motive for commanding it. Now, this is pure speculation. I don't have any evidence to back that up. But what you have to try and do in these situations is imagine why would something like this happen.
Or you, Kenevan Gorgeous-Tani, you could also wonder, the former president, the predecessor, you're allowed to run twice for president in Haiti, but you can't run consecutively. Michel Martelly, Moïse's protege, they had a falling out. He certainly stands to benefit if ever there is an election.
Yes, I mean, it is totally a possibility, but of course it is, as we've all said, still very early, and things are still very murky, and no one really knows exactly what has happened. And you see that with also going back to the reaction from the US, they're extremely careful in the wording that they use, and extremely careful to try to not take sides, to try to not name names, talking about being for the democratic institutions, and insisting that they have very little information right now, and so they're trying to stay as far away as possible until they know exactly what happened. And as one of the guests saying, there are things that just don't seem right, things that just don't fit. And I feel that the Americans sending that delegation to Haiti is to try to figure out what exactly happened and to have a better idea who might be behind it. Because if they take a position for the acting prime minister and then it turns out that he had something to do with it, then the Americans are in a very bad situation. So I think they're trying to wait and see what really has happened, and then they'll make a decision or an announcement.
Plenty of suspects, by the way, that are possible in all of this. So yeah, it's something we're definitely going to continue to follow. And if the United States doesn't want to own this crisis, well, it's because it's got enough on its hands trying to pull out from Afghanistan.
Yeah, because we've been in Afghanistan for fucking 20 years. Always trying to pull out of Afghanistan. Yeah, since 2001, bitch. Hey, what the fuck?
We are calling this new $1 million stimulus program. It's a brand new program that is paying qualified homeowners over $2,039 after install.
Now is my favorite time of the week, the mailbag. First question from Camille. Hey, Michael. I'm a single woman in my mid-20s in the dating world and have a question. My mom and men and women from older generations always talk about how women hold the power in relationships and dating. But to me, it seems like that power balance has shifted since our culture has changed. More women are likely to sleep around with guys that they aren't in a relationship with because society is preaching sex activity, and this gives away a lot of the power. This type of culture allows more and more guys to remain single because they need to get what they want from girls, and they are reluctant to put in the effort for a girl who would make them wait. I know your opinion on waiting for marriage, but what are your thoughts on the concept of the power women have, and if you agree that it has shifted more toward men? Sincerely, who runs the world? No, seriously, who? A reference to my cousin, Beyonce. You were totally right. Your intuition is right. Older generations would think that women hold the power because women withheld something that men really, really wanted until they got something out of it. And then feminism convinced them to give up their leverage in romantic relationships, and that has led to misery for women. And has led to some physical pleasure for men, but I think probably ultimately misery for men as well. And certainly that power dynamic has shifted dramatically, even now to the point that some women who don't want to have sex before marriage will feel really pressured to do that because they don't think that they'll be able to hold on to a guy, because a guy can just move on to any chickie he wants and get exactly what he desires. So yeah, that's a very big problem. I am noticing a little bit of a shift when you look at young conservatives, and I don't mean millennials. Somehow we always refer to millennials as the youngest generation. We're going to be 60 and they're going to say, oh, you young millennials. But Gen Z, for instance. A lot of the memes coming out of Gen Z, a lot of the arguments you hear from politically astute Gen Zers is that they don't just want promiscuous sex, that they don't just want to look at porn all the time and move on girl to girl to girl and swipe culture. They actually want a serious relationship. They want to get married, they want to have a family, they want to have kids. That would be the way to stand athwart history yelling stop. The progressive march toward this drugged up, promiscuous, sex-crazed culture would be to say no to that. So, find one of those guys. I think the trads, as they are called, are having a real ascendancy right now. But power has shifted, and so that there's no denying that. You are at a disadvantage. But I wouldn't be discouraged by that. I would stand for virtue if you are so inclined to do that, because I think ultimately that will be more gratifying, even if it's a little tougher in the dating world right now. Hey there, I'm glad you liked that clip. You can get the whole episode called Getting Over Self-Government here. You don't even, look, if you ring the bell and subscribe, you'll get the notifications. You won't need me to tell you things like this. You'll get that episode. You can also get it on Apple Podcasts, everywhere else you get your podcasts. You can also get my book. The #1 national best-selling Speechless, sold many, many more copies than the #1 bestseller on the New York Times list, but we're very proud to be snubbed by the New York Times. Thank you very much to everyone who's read it. Thanks for leaving a review. We'll see you next time.
Feels weird picking it up.
Leaving Earth to find new homes in space is an old dream of humanity and will sooner or later be necessary for our survival. The planet that gets the most attention is Mars, a small, toxic, and energy-poor planet that just about seems good enough for a colony of depressed humans huddled in underground cities. But what if we think bigger? What if we take Venus, one of the most hostile and deadly places in the solar system, and turn it into a colony? Not by building lofty cloud cities, but by creating a proper second Earth. It might be easier than think. Venus is by far the planet in the solar system with a surface temperature of 460 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead. This heat is due to the most extreme greenhouse effect in the solar system. CO2 is great at trapping heat, even a rise from 0.03% to 0.04% in Earth's atmosphere is heating up our planet right now. Venus's atmosphere is 97% CO2. Also, Venus's atmosphere is 93 times denser than Earth's. Standing on Venus's surface would feel like taking a dive about 900 meters deep into the ocean. The pressure would kill you instantly. It's a truly horrible place, so why should we even bother? First and foremost, Venus is almost as big as Earth and has 90% of its surface gravity. Surface gravity is a big problem colonizing the solar system because it's very likely that long stays in low-gravity places will have negative health effects. Venus's size means it could be the second largest habitat in the solar system. a new home for billions of humans and trillions of animals, with oceans, lush forests, and a beautiful blue sky. A properly terraformed Venus may be the most pleasant place to live outside of Earth. While we can't exactly terraform Venus today, a slightly more ambitious future version of us could take this project on. It will take a few generations to complete and be a huge challenge, like building the Great Pyramids was for our ancestors. But then, it's not like humans have never started projects that took more than a lifetime to complete. Okay, let's do it. Before anything else, we need to cool Venus down and remove the gas that makes up the extremely heavy atmosphere. As mentioned, there's a lot of it. Around 465 billion tons. How do we do that? There are a few options. We could create giant solar collectors powering a huge array of laser beams that heat up the atmosphere so much that it's blasted into space. Although we would need thousands of times the entire power generating capacity of humanity, and it would still take thousands of years to remove the atmosphere. Another way is to sequester the atmosphere, binding the CO2 in different compounds through chemical reactions. We could mine elements like calcium or magnesium on Mercury and shoot them at Venus via mass driver systems, electric rails that make rockets unnecessary on smaller planets. The metals would combine to bind the CO2 into different carbonates basically forever. But the scale makes the whole thing impractical. We would need several 100 billion tons of material to sequester the CO2 this way. Seems like a waste of material that might take too long. An equally ridiculous idea that could actually work is to put Venus in the shade, literally, by constructing a huge mirror to blot out the sun to just freeze the atmosphere. The mirror doesn't need to be complex or massive, just a very thin foil with a little structural support. Building such a large flat surface so close to the sun will turn it effectively into a solar sail and push it out of position. So instead of one giant circular object, our mirror will consist of many different pieces. Annular slats of angled mirrors can reflect sunlight from one set of mirrors to the next. Mirrors would be angled, reflecting light from one to another until the light is redirected to the back, balancing the force on the front and holding them in position. After a few years of getting the infrastructure in place, things start slowly and then escalate. For the first few decades, the atmosphere slowly cools down but stays dense and dead, until after some 60 years, it reaches the critical temperature of 31 degrees Celsius. Suddenly, the great flood begins on Venus as CO2 turns to liquid at this pressure and begins to rain down. A constant global rainstorm of unbelievable proportions lasting 30 years. The pressure and temperature suddenly begin to drop in unison. For almost a century, puddles turn into lakes and oceans. The surface temperature is now minus 56 degrees Celsius, and the pressure has dropped to only 7 times the pressure on Earth. Finally, at a really unpleasant minus 81 degrees Celsius, the CO2 oceans begin to freeze and the rain turns into snow. This leaves us with a frozen Venus covered in oceans as hard as rock and gigantic CO2 glaciers. What remains of the atmosphere is mostly nitrogen at about 3 times Earth's surface pressure. If you don't mind freezing and suffocating, you can now take a stroll over Venus's surface. But the frozen CO2 remains a bit of a problem. At some point, we want to warm up the planet, but if we do, the CO2 ice will melt and fill up the atmosphere again. So we need some way to keep it from doing that. One is to simply cover it all with cheap plastic insulation and cover it up with ground up Venus rock or water oceans. Although some planetary scientists will be very stressed out about us building a new planet containing a potential time bomb like that. A few unfortunately timed volcanoes could melt a lot of CO2 at once and ruin everything. Another obvious solution is to shoot it all out into space and collect it into a small moon for storage and future use. We can make this more efficient by using mass drivers instead of rockets, but moving all that mass will still be a pretty intense challenge that will take some time to solve. Whatever we end up doing with the atmosphere, to move forward we need water, which we could get from ice moons. Europa, a moon of Jupiter, has twice as much water as Earth's oceans. Now, catching a moon and transporting it through the solar system is not exactly easy. So instead, it might be easier to cut chunks of ice off Europa with an army of construction drones and shoot them at Venus using more of those mass drivers. Space tethers could save us a lot of effort and energy here. We made a whole video explaining how they work, but in a nutshell, they are slings that can take a payload on both ends. On Europa, they do most of the work needed to catapult our ice to Venus. The ice hits the Venus tethers, which gently drop it into the atmosphere, where it falls down as snow. In exchange, the Venus tethers get to catch CO2 ice shot up from below and accelerate it into orbit. We can remove excess nitrogen using this same method to further lower our atmospheric pressure. After a few decades or centuries, Venus would be covered by a nice, shallow, frozen ocean a few hundred meters deep. It would look extremely different from today. A few continents and countless islands have formed. This is beginning to look a bit like our planet. Now the last and most magnificent phase of terraforming begins, making the atmosphere breathable and adding life. First, we need light, and we need to heat the planet up again. A Venus day is 2,802 hours long, more than 116 Earth days. So if we just remove our giant mirror, we would grill half of our planet. Even without the massive atmosphere, temperatures would reach unbearable levels. The simplest way to create a day-night cycle and let some energy in again is with another set of mirrors to illuminate our continents and melt our water oceans, which would let us completely control how much energy we get, where it goes. The atmosphere is now mostly made up of nitrogen and basically devoid of oxygen. So the first inhabitants will likely be trillions and trillions of cyanobacteria, which can get photosynthesizing and release oxygen. We know that they can quickly turn around the atmosphere of a planet because billions of years ago they were probably responsible for turning the toxic atmosphere of our young Earth into an atmosphere with enough oxygen for more complex animal life. But not only that, cyanobacteria can fix nitrogen from the atmosphere and turn it into nutrients that can be used by living beings. This way, they will essentially fertilize our dead ocean water and prepare it for more complex organisms. On land, our colonists need to grind down some of the former Venusian surface to make soil for nitrogen-fixing plants to grow on. Eventually, billions of trees would spread, creating large forests covering massive parts of the continent. Venus would turn green. To speed things up, CO2 would be strategically released to supply the plants and cyanobacteria. Areas already covered with plants could get extra daylight from our orbital mirrors, so the plants would be active for most of each day. Maybe we won't have to do this with the same plants and animals we know today. As genetic engineering matures and our understanding of genetics and the machinery of life expands, we might just engineer life as we need it. All in all, it would take several thousand years to make the atmosphere breathable by humans. In the meantime, you could stroll around with nothing more than regular clothes and an oxygen mask. Settlers would enjoy a vast new planet filled with resources and bathed in sunlight. They might think of new ways to use the vast amounts of carbon dioxide ice and nitrogen orbiting in space above. Industrial processes, rocket fuel, or even boosting the terraforming of another planet like tiny Mars. Venus is fully terraformed. Animals roam through vast ecosystems. Cities are being constructed. Billions of settlers and their descendants make this world their home. They will see images of the past, how Venus was once the most hostile planet around, how it took hundreds of years to freeze hell and to ship in the oceans, and another few thousand years to make it possible to breathe freely. They will barely be able to believe it. Okay, maybe it's not that easy to terraform Venus, and a lot of things must go right for this future to become reality. But it is possible, and with technology that is within the reach of a motivated and slightly more advanced humanity that wants to venture into space. The only thing that's stopping it is our imagination, and that at least is a problem that's easy to overcome. If you think about it, your imagination is the only thing stopping you from doing all kinds of things. All you need is a little nudge, and we might just have the right thing to get you started. We are big fans of Skillshare, an online learning community that offers thousands of classes for all skill levels in tons of creative disciplines like illustration, animation, or film and video. Or you could try a class on home decoration, growing houseplants, or playing the guitar. There's something for everyone, really. The first 1,000 Kurzgesagt viewers to click the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Since we started working with Skillshare, you, our viewers, have taken over 100,000 hours of classes, including our own 3 Skillshare classes on how we make our animations. If you push to get you going, maybe get started with some advice on motivation and inspiration. We liked the scientific method for artists. Find inspiration, get motivated, and grow your creative skills by Kendall Hidegos. In this class, Kendall explains her 4-phase process for exploring and figuring out your direction as an artist. For us, it was a great way to get into the flow of creating something. But anything that makes you feel excited and sparks new ideas is a great first step. If you want to get creative with new skills and support Kurzgesagt, give it a go.
Love is MyLevo. Levo is the easiest way to make infusions at home. Use your infused oils to make gummies, butter, bath bombs.
One of the greatest illusions in life is continuity. 66 million years ago, the continuity of the dinosaurs had been going on for around 165 million years already, and it didn't seem this would change anytime soon. The world was warm and pleasant, and most of the land was covered with lush forests and an incredible diversity of trees, flowers, ferns, and trillions of critters. Dinosaurs were ubiquitous and had diversified into hundreds of species of all shapes and sizes. Titanosaurs, large, gentle giants, shared the world-famous beasts like Tyrannosaurus rex or Edmontosaurus. Pectinodon hunted in the undergrowth, while Edmontosaurus wandered coastlines and swamps. An ancient paradise, a world of plenty, full of life. 66 million years ago, be on a Tuesday afternoon, life was the same as it had been the day before, or 1,000 years before, or pretty much 1,000,000 years before. Things were good for our feathered dinosaur buddies, until a tiny, tiny detail in the sky changed. If there were dinosaurs watching the stars, one night they may have noticed the appearance of a new star, a tiny dot that for many weeks slowly became bigger and brighter. Until one fateful day, it looked like another small moon in night sky. And then it faded from sight as it dipped into Earth's shadow. For a few more hours, the illusion of continuity was upheld, until it was not anymore. In the morning, the object suddenly appears again, now almost as large as the sun, the sky, and growing every moment, heading for the coast near the Yucatan Peninsula. It takes the asteroid only seconds to pass through the thin layer between space and the ground to make contact, as it enters the atmosphere at almost 60 times the speed of sound. Let's stop time. Here, we see the unnamed asteroid about to commit speciescide. Larger than Mount Everest, it reaches from the ocean high into the atmosphere, higher than passenger planes would fly millions of years later. At this moment, the world was one way. In a fraction of a second, it would be fundamentally different. Let's make the transition. As the asteroid hits the shallow ocean and the bedrock below, the energy of billions of nuclear weapons is at once as the asteroid vaporizes. A flash of light illuminates the sky as an eerie, bright white sphere grows over the Gulf of Mexico. Bedrock melts into seething hot plasma at tens of thousands of degrees Celsius. The thermal radiation from the explosion travels at the speed of light and immediately burns everything within a radius of about 1,500 kilometers, while the energy from the impact pushes so hard against Earth's crust that it loses all strength and flows away from the impact site like a liquid, creating a hole 25 kilometers deep and 100 kilometers wide. The ocean is pushed back for hundreds of kilometers, like when a kid jumps into a puddle. As the crust bounces back, melted and flowing crust forms a temporary mountain stretching 10 kilometers into the sky. an incredible amount of material is blasted into the higher atmosphere or even out into space, as much as 60 times the original mass of the asteroid. The violence of the strike is felt everywhere on Earth within minutes. A magnitude 11 earthquake may be the most powerful quake any living thing has ever witnessed in billions of years. It is so insanely strong that in India it might have shaken gigantic lava fields and caused volcanic eruptions that would last for 30,000 years and cover half of the Indian subcontinent with lava. Even on the side of Earth opposite the impact, the ground still moved by several meters. Nobody would sleep through this day. The gigantic explosion crashes against the atmosphere with unprecedented violence and causes a shockwave that reaches speeds of more than 1,000 kilometers per hour near the site of impact, similar to the hyperhurricanes on gas giants like Neptune. In mid-America, basically any soil, vegetation or animal is just shredded into pieces and catapulted thousands of kilometers away. Now the previously displaced oceans return. As the temporary mountain at the site of impact collapses, a ring of tsunamis as high as 1 kilometer, enough to cover all skyscrapers humans would ever build, heads in all directions. As they crash into the coasts of the continents surrounding the impact, they will drown thousands of kilometers of coastline. 15 hours later, some of the waves that get refracted around South America will still tower as much as 100 meters into the sky. But we still haven't talked about the worst thing yet. A lot of the debris yeeted into space will orbit Earth for thousands of years. Some may hit the Moon or even Mars. But most of it comes right back. When things fall through the atmosphere at such speed, they get very hot, as in hundreds of degrees hot. And this happens to millions of tons of material everywhere. It rapidly heats up the atmosphere to insane temperatures. We don't know exactly how hot it got or how long this heat shock lasted, but there are two ideas here. Either the air was heated to hundreds of degrees for a few minutes, or to thousands of degrees for around 1 minute. In any case, the air became as hot as the inside of an industrial oven. How bad the global effects of this were is contested, but if enough heat reached the surface, a lot of plants and animals would have died very quickly if they couldn't bury themselves or escape into caves. The heat, together with raining debris, also may have ignited material on forest floors and sparked wildfires as the Earth rotated under the searing hot plume. In a few hours, massive wildfires were probably burning around the globe. Some of them may have lasted for months and turned Earth into a horrifying, hot, hellish version of itself. As the day of the impact draws to an end, many of the dinosaurs are already dead, but the worst is still to come. The gigantic plume of vaporized material reaches the upper atmosphere and spreads around the whole globe. Together with the soot from the burnt planet and the aerosols generated at impact, the planet sinks into a deep darkness, with only the remaining raging fires illuminating the scenery. Whatever plants survive the firestorms will now be starved for sunlight as global photosynthesis is temporarily shut down. Within days, temperatures crush as much as 25 degrees Celsius. The oceans were especially hard hit. The lack of sunlight killed over 90% of plankton, which formed the basis of the food web of marine life. Ultimately, this would kill off the large marine reptiles and ammonites that used to dominate the seas. The biosphere the survivors now find themselves in is like an alien landscape. Ash, debris, and the burned remains of the formerly lush and blooming life cover the ground. The sky is dark and it's cold, and fresh food is scarce, while fungi thrive. For months and years, the planet will be a hostile and deadly place. The sudden global winter will last for decades. At least 75% of all species on Earth will just vanish from existence. And so, as the day ends, the world is suddenly different. The continuity that went on for millions of years is no more. The era of the dinosaurs is over. Just like that.
Tired of searching for the lowest service prices? We'll make it easy. At Ken Pollock Tire and Auto Center, we offer $9.95 oil changes all day, every day. Yes, only $9.95, and we service all makes and all models. Need tires? Nope.
Eventually, from the ashes of the old world, survivors emerged. Birds that are the direct descendants of the dinosaurs and mammals that would eventually become the dominant animals on the planet. Without the asteroid, who knows what life on Earth would look like today? Without the sudden disruption of dinosaur continuity that completely changed the planet and all life on it, we might have never had the opportunity to become what we are today. It's not clear how long the human era will last. So far, modern humans have been around for 0.1% of the time the dinosaurs were. And in this short amount of time, we've achieved impressive feats, from making the world our own to reaching space and splitting the atom. Yet our future and our long-term survival are not a given. If we're not careful, it could end in an instant, like the age of the dinosaurs ended. But in contrast to them, we know that our continuity is fragile, even if it doesn't feel like it. We can be prepared and be vigilant and hopeful. If we're lucky, our journey will go on for a long, long time. Speaking of journeys, we want to address something in the spirit of transparency. Kurzgesagt has changed in the last 2 years. We've become more than a YouTube channel or animation studio, and now also run a paper shop that sells hundreds of thousands of calendars, posters, and notebooks. That's not a happy accident. Many of us have a background in graphic design. Paper products are our roots, and we actually started out creating posters, books, and print infographics. We love that you can touch them, smell them, nerd about small details and printing techniques. Just like the channel, we started small and without great ambition. Step by step, we found the right printers and papers, learned about shipping, and expanded our shop. We put a huge amount of research, love, and hours into it because this is the only way we know how to do things. We don't just want to make generic merch, we want to make things that fit our mission of making science exciting and creating beautiful things. Things that persist and are made with high quality and love. Our shop gives us another outlet to do this, and as a nice side effect, has turned into our main source of income for everything we do on this channel, which also keeps us independent and our videos free for everyone. So, we want to build further on that and create more things that last. We've just started a new notebook line called Pocket Log that we'll expand on in the future. The first edition is a dinosaur-themed collection that will hopefully serve a future paleontologist well. There are loads of plans for sciencey stuff, more journals and calendars and infographics. Let us know what you would like us to make for your room, kids, classrooms, and yourself. In the end, the things we do work because you like them, and because you enable us to put thousands of hours into videos and hundreds of hours into posters and journals. Thank you so much for that. We're looking forward to making fun, sciencey stuff for you, no matter if it's a video, a poster, or something else entirely. Thank you for watching.
When we see Pleiadian shapes, we see a sphere of light, because the Merkaba moving so fast. The Atlantean civilization was the product of Arturian people, but the first Atlantean...
Yeah, the feet paintings are my favorite too.
Consciousness is perhaps the biggest real nature. Stripped to its core meaning, consciousness is what allows us to be aware both of our surroundings and of our own inner state. But thinking about consciousness has this habit of taking us round in circles. We all intuitively know what consciousness is. It's this. It's what you're experiencing here, right now. But once we try to pinpoint just what exactly it is, it leaves us grasping at thin air. And not just us. Philosophers and scientists struggle to define consciousness. Different schools and ideas compete with one another, but no one has come close to figuring it out. It's unsettling to realize that we don't understand what makes us aware of ourselves and the world. In this fuzzy area, consciousness and intelligence are also related, although they are not the same. We'll talk in greater depth about theories of consciousness and intelligence in other videos. Like much of what makes us human, our consciousness is likely to have evolved from less complex forms as a product of evolution by natural selection. It has probably emerged from an immense several 100 million year sequence of countless microsteps that together make up a sort of gradient of consciousness. What was the first step on this path from the non-conscious to the basic consciousness that ultimately led to the convoluted consciousness we humans enjoy today? Take a stone. The consensus is that a stone is not conscious, though not everyone agrees even on this. Some panpsychists claim that a lump of rock may have an inner life. However, there are no real grounds for any such assumption, since stones never show behavior. Their inner life can neither be proven nor disproven. A more common starting point is with living things. A living thing, or a self, is a part of the universe that sustains itself and makes more of its kind. To do so, it needs energy. And this is where an awareness of the world comes in handy. The original function of consciousness was probably to direct a mobile self that was short of energy to a fresh supply of food. On the smaller scales of life, you don't need to be aware to find food. Trichoplax adherens, one of the simplest of all animals, moves around haphazardly. It slows down in the presence of food and speeds up in its absence. This is highly effective and makes the tiny creature spend more time where there is food than where there is not. But it never moves in a particular direction towards a particular target, and there's no need for it to be conscious of its environment. The first major step towards consciousness was probably taken when mobile selves started to move themselves directionally, moving towards what was good for them, say food, and away from what was less good, say someone else who thought that they were food. Take Dugicia tigrina, a tiny worm known for its funny face. Sometimes the worm is hungry, and sometimes not. This means that when it moves, the worm self is not simply producing an automatic response to an external stimulus, but that its actions depend upon its inner physiological state, whether it's hungry or sated. When it's just eaten, the worm is less energetic, but when starved for a while, it will move itself in the direction of tasty things. It uses chemoreceptors on its head to smell its environment and guide it in the direction where the scent of food is strongest. After finding and eating a meal, our worm buddy heads back to a dark, sheltered spot to digest it in safety, until it's hungry again. But animals that blindly follow their sense of smell don't have a concrete objective in view. They still lack a sense of where they are heading. So the next step on the ladder of consciousness is to add some perception at a distance, like vision. Vision adds context and depth to our world. With vision comes a sense of the space we and our food exist in. It adds a whole new dimension to awareness and is a huge step towards more familiar consciousness. Optical apparatus like an eye enables us to visualize our goal and lock onto it. But even at this stage, a self only able to pursue its food as long as it sees it. So the next logical step needs to happen on the inside. to visualize food in its absence, for example, a self needs to create some sort of inner representation of the world. Now an animal can continue looking for food even when it escapes its sensory range. Because of this inner representation of what is relevant in the world, it can remain focused on its food and its desire to get it. Our self now exists in a world it can get familiar with. The ability to remember things has emerged. Thanks to memory, animals can be distracted from a pursuit for a few seconds, but quickly continue their path afterwards. A related phenomenon is called object permanence. This describes our awareness that things continue to exist even when we can't see them. This cognitive skill is enjoyed by some mammals and birds, and perhaps other animals too. Human babies tend to develop this ability around the time they turn 8 months, while baby chickens show this ability within a day or two of being born. The capacity to remember a thing in its absence suggests at least a basic sense of time. A sense of time is a big step on the ladder of consciousness. It may also enable a self to look forward from the present moment and anticipate the future. Adult chickens, for example, are able to resist a meal put in front of them if they expect to receive a bigger meal as a prize for holding back for a while. This sort of delayed gratification means there is an ability to visualize a reward that only exists in the future, which can be quite a challenge even for adult humans. Western scrub jays are experts in delayed gratification. They show an even more elaborate sense of the future when they hide food in a cache to retrieve it at a later date. The scrub jays will even re-hide their food if they become aware that a potential thief has been watching them. This means that they know that there are other hungry selves out there who are aware and see the world from their own different perspective. Crafty scrub jays can sort of read the mind of their fellow birds. This ability to mind read is crucial for complex levels of consciousness. By putting yourself in the position of others, you can outsmart a rich competitor or empathize with a hungry friend. Language takes the ability to read minds and represent what is absent to a whole new level. Words enable us to construct hypotheses about the world, make detailed plans, and to communicate them with others. Words enable us to think about ourselves and our place in the universe, and even about our own consciousness, which is something we'll be doing more in future videos. So, what is the origin of our consciousness? It probably began as the directed motion of a hungry self towards a source of food, with the survival benefits this gave it over competitors that moved at random or not at all. It probably all started with the urge for more food. So even with the sophisticated consciousness that allows us to dream about space, build skyscrapers, or obsess about novels, it's not surprising that we can't stop thinking about where we'll get our next meal. Collectively, we've put so much thought and ingenuity into getting food that we can now just get our food to come to us with little conscious effort. This video is part 1 of a 3-part video series relating to big questions of life and the universe, made possible by a grant from the Templeton World Charity Foundation. You can find our sources and further reading in the video description, or get the Consciousness book by Rupert Glasgow for free, linked down below. If you want to help us make more videos, you can do so on patreon.com, or get one of our posters from our shop.
Go to Fiverr.com and find one in seconds. Or don't go to Fiverr and waste your time searching for freelancers instead of finally taking a trip abroad. Constantino. Oh, should be near Prussia. Find your freelancer quickly and easily at Fiverr.com.
As effective as minoxidil. How do you identify hair growth products that do not work? There's no need to worry about receding hairlines or a
The desire to be freed from the limits of human experience is as old as our first stories. We exist in an endless universe, only bound by the laws of physics, and yet our consciousness is trapped in mortal machines made of meat. With the breathtaking explosion of innovation and progress, for the first time, the concept of leaving our flesh piles behind and uploading our minds into a digital utopia seems possible, even like the logical next step on our evolutionary ladder. Mind uploading and digital immortality are some of the core themes of the game Cyberpunk 2077. It plays in a grim dystopian future where humanity has progressed far beyond today's technology and explores what this could mean for humanity. About a year ago, CD Projekt Red asked us if we would like to make a video about some of these ideas, and we were immediately on board. So, let's explore this topic together. Is it possible to upload your mind into a computer? Well, it's complicated. Upload what exactly? Mind is one of those words that are really hard to define. It's thought to be the collective abilities of your consciousness and intelligence, the thing that lets you imagine, recognize, and dream. Mind uploading is the hypothetical concept of making a copy of this inner world and transferring it into a computer to run a simulation of your consciousness. But even defining it gets really hard, really fast. The possibility of mind uploading is based on 3 assumptions. Assumption 1. Your mind is in your brain's structure, arrangement, and biochemistry. The idea that everything about the mind can be found in the brain is called physicalism, and it keeps our discussion within the domain of natural law. Assumption 2. At some point, we will understand the brain well enough and possess the technology to simulate all of its aspects to make a digital mind copy. Assumption 3. Computer software can host your mind, which means the mind is computable. There is no physical property in the brain, including consciousness, that cannot be simulated accurately, even if it requires a lot of code. All of these assumptions have been proposed and challenged by scientists and philosophers, and they remain the subject of passionate debate. With so many fundamental questions still unanswered, it's hard to discuss the topic without annoying someone. Whatever your position, every discussion of mind upload has to begin with the brain. The brain in a nutshell. The brain is the most complex biological structure known and deserves its own entire video, so let's just take a brief look at it. Around 100 billion neurons are communicating via 1 million billion connections that are sending signals up to 1,000 times each second, which is 1 quadrillion events every second of your waking life. And it's not just neurons, there are billions of supporting and immune cells of various types performing different jobs. On a macro level, the brain can be divided into sections with different roles, from breathing and heart rate to coordinating movement and involuntary reflexes. The most developed parts, the or the outermost layer of the brain, hold memories, our ability to plan, think and imagine, hope and dream.
More than 20 million people use Grammarly every day to improve their writing. You can use it on your computer or your phone. And for your
Where exactly the U part of the brain is situated is not entirely clear. We know that areas like the precuneus cortex have the greatest influence on our consciousness, but also that several areas can network together to share tasks none of them can do alone. The brain's building blocks are not exactly simple either. Neurons are not just wires, they alter and process information. Synapses, where signals are handed over from one neuron to the next, contain receptors for hundreds of chemical signals, opening up to outside influence. We have a basic understanding of how these work, and we can accurately predict their behavior at small scales, but there's a lot more to the brain than just nerve signals. Hormones play a huge role, like serotonin, which affects our mood, or histamine, which helps us learn. The brain is influenced by our other parts too, from heart, nerves to gut bacteria. What seemed like a very complicated system to begin with gets even more complicated the more we learn about it. To get this wildly interconnected mess of cells and meat and chemicals into a computer, we need a model that we can simulate in our digital world. Some sort of scan. Unfortunately, our scan technology, like fMRI machines, is not nearly good enough to attempt such a thing. But there is a different method that seems very promising. Cutting a brain into tiny slices and scanning them with a high-resolution electron microscope to create an accurate map of all the cells and connections. In 2019, scientists successfully mapped a cubic millimeter of mouse brain, roughly the size of a big grain of sand. It contained 100,000 neurons with 1 billion synapses and 4 kilometers of nerve fibers. This grain of brain was cut into 25,000 slices. 5 electron microscopes ran continuously for 5 months, collecting more than 100 million images. It took 3 months to assemble the images into a 3D model. The completed data set fills up to 1 million gigabytes of cloud storage. To scan a whole human brain, we would have to repeat this effort 1 million times, which is much easier said than done. Even worse, to correctly simulate a brain, we might even have to map out much smaller building blocks to include the billions of underlying proteins or even individual molecules that cause all the behaviors we see at the cellular level, which might produce more data than the capacity of all data storage on Earth. Brain water to consciousness wine. While all of these issues are annoying, the real question is how we turn the static blueprint of the brain into an active thing. Even if we have a scan, down to the level of synapses, we need laws and rules that animate the wiring diagram to endow this static structure with life, update it with various laws of chemical binding, of electrodynamics, to animate the simulation. So it becomes a dynamic, active thing like a brain that exists from 1 microsecond to the next.
Good thing I went water shopping. I might have to bring a case of water to the studio. It's so hot. So hot. How hot is it? It's so hot. I saw Satan selling ice water. Only been here for an hour? Oh damn. I would have been here longer, but my stream cut off the first time. And then, I'm not gonna lie, kinda got stuck on Instagram and Facebook. Like I said, I feel like I've been here for 2 hours already. But I forgot I had to start the stream over. But it's all good, yo. We starting to lay down the second coat on this wood grain. Making progress on the paint. Making progress on the paintings. That's something that matters if you're in the studio. Some type of progress. Something. As long as something is getting done, you're moving in the right direction. You know? Just keep moving forward. I know the internet is going to be conky the next couple of days, y'all. Matter of fact, I need to look up this. Is it a hurricane that's hitting the East Coast right now that's going to give us all this extra rain we're going to get? Hurricane Alyssa? Tropical storm Alyssa drenches northeast on its way to New England 6 hours ago. says
presentations in Canada.
in the next hour, by 7 o'clock, 100% chance of rain by 7. That's what they're saying. So by 8 o'clock is about 70%. And then it looks like it's only going to rain for about an hour or so, maybe, what they're predicting. Saturday, it says it's going to be partly cloudy. And then Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, they say there's chances of rain each day, up to 50% on some days. And it's still going to be in the 80s and 90s. Muggy, the rest of the week is going to be muggy as fuck, basically. Is what they're trying to say. Be prepared to sweat, people.